Okay, our class is being recorded and I am going to start the recording right now. So again, welcome to Reduce Inflammation Naturally. Please put your questions in the Q&A and do take a look at the chat. I posted some information about future classes and I highly recommend the Giant Nutrition classes. They are excellent. I am also going to start the online live transcript. So you do have the option to turn off the transcript if you don't want to watch it during the webinar, but you do have the information on the bottom. So today's class is Reducing Inflammation Naturally, and our nutritionist and speaker today from Giant Nutrition is Kristen McGill. She's an RD CSOWM who has her bachelor's in nutritional science from Penn State. And she also did her dietetic internship through Penn State. She's board certified in obesity and weight management and is also working toward her master's degree in food and nutrition. Her career paths have included working as a clinical dietitian in hospitals, long-term care, bariatrics, and now retail as well through Giant Nutrition. She's always eager to learn all aspects of the world of nutrition, and her passion is food. And the other nutritionists who have done these wonderful webinars as well, they love their food, so they definitely share wonderful information with us. She enjoys cooking and baking, whether it be healthy weeknight meals, special occasions, or indulging her friends and family with homemade baked goods. Kristen's always on the hunt for a food adventure, whether it be a new restaurant or a new type of cuisine to try. So I'm sure she shares all of our desire to soon be able to go and dine out again with everyone. In her spare time, she enjoys soaking up everything that the DC area scene has to offer. So please join me in welcoming Kristen and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Charisse, and thank you all for spending a little bit of your day with me. I won't go through all the introductory things, but yes, I am a registered dietitian and in-store nutritionist with Giant, and I'm super excited to spend some time with you talking about inflammation. It's a very overlooked topic, but this is one of my passions. Love talking about it, and I love the fact that there are some things that we can do naturally, so we don't need to seek out anything or follow any strict diets. It's really just encompassing that whole balanced eating, healthy lifestyle, and we're on our way to just fighting it off naturally. So let's go ahead and get started. Usually with our agendas, and if you've attended some of our other webinars, we break it down into 3 separate sections. In the office, which is not the literal office because we know we're working from home. This is more the science and the data. We're just going to gain a better understanding on the different types of inflammation, why that warrants our attention. Then we're going to head to the aisles. Again, you guys know I love my food. So this is my chance of bringing the aisles of Giant to you, and we can talk about certain foods that help naturally fight inflammation, or we call those our food fighters. And then lastly, we're going to tie all of our information together in the kitchen. How can we prep? How can we plan and just prepare for day-to-day eating, just fighting that inflammation? All right, so let's head to the office. This is not the literal office. This is really the science and the data. What is research saying these days about inflammation? So there are different types in it. We have to look at inflammation as either something that works for us, but sometimes it works against us. So first of all, looking at inflammation, it's the body's natural response to injury. So there's a signaling tactic that our bodies will send to the immune system that, hey, there's healing, or hey, there's repair that's needed. There's also that defense mechanism. So anytime we come into contact with a foreign invader, such as a virus or bacteria, so think about when we get a fever, our body temperature is raised because our body's working to help kill off any bacteria or virus, making it an unsustainable environment for any kind of foreign invader to thrive off of. So clearly without inflammation, we would have wounds that would fester, our infections could become deadly. So this is a case where it is our friend. But the opposite is true. If inflammation goes on for too long, this can actually promote chronic diseases. In fact, chronic inflammatory diseases are the most significant cause of death in the world, according to the World Health Organization. In fact, they're ranking chronic disease as the greatest threat to human health. So this is a pretty serious thing. What are the different types of inflammation? So you have acute inflammation, which is a short-term process. It usually occurs in response to tissue injury like bruises or burns or cuts. So think about if you have a hangnail. Think about when you stub your toe. I actually had a very gnarly bruise on my shin not too long ago when I was rearranging some furniture. So I know that that's acute. It's just short-term. Everything's going to heal. That's an acute phase response. And of course, when we encounter an acute injury, we can expect to see the injury occur within a couple hours or maybe even minutes, but it is characterized by those 5 cardinal signs. So the pain, the redness, immobility. Again, I go back to the whole example of stubbing your toe or stubbing your thumb. There's swelling and the heat. Natural responses that we can expect to see with that acute injury. Now, the first stage of inflammation is often called irritation, which then becomes inflammation. Inflammation is often followed by the discharge of pus, and then comes the granulation stage. I'm talking more about tissue injury, like a cut, something where you might actually have endured some kind of bleeding. Okay, so then the next stage is granulation, and then new tissue is formed. So not like we need to know the different stages of wound healing, but it is important to just recognize that most of these injuries are going to heal on their own within 1 to 2 weeks. Then we have our subacute inflammation, which is the period between acute and chronic inflammation. So this might last a little bit longer, up to 2 to 6 weeks. So think about some of those injuries that might take a little bit longer to heal. So maybe a severe bruise, maybe stitches, or you're recovering from some type of surgery. So very similar, it's going to heal. It just takes a little bit longer. So you're still on the process of recovery, just might take a little bit longer than the acute response. Now, lastly, we want to talk about that chronic inflammation. This is long-term mechanistic process that can last prolonged periods of time. So think about several months, years, even decades. So if we have chronic inflammation, it's not something that's going to happen overnight and then, of course, result in chronic disease risk. It's a long-term buildup. So just think about it like that. It can be caused by a range of factors, including age. So these are things that we can't really control. Environmental stress, which I will talk about free radical oxidation here in a minute. But just know with the environment, we come into contact with something called free radicals. Now, I won't break down the chemistry and everything, but what happens in the body is free radicals can kind of wreak havoc on just a system of processes that go on. So long-term free radical exposure can actually induce that oxidative stress, which therefore promotes chronic disease. Now, we come into contact with free radicals from our environment, from pollution and smog, smoke, and secondhand smoke, and harmful UV rays. So again, it's something that we can't really help. But we will talk about here today that there are some foods that are natural antioxidants to help combat that free radical exposure. All right, allergies are another one. Asthma, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people do suffer from allergies and asthma. This is also a form of chronic inflammation. And then, of course, there is high blood pressure. So we don't really think of this as inflammation, but all of this can lead to that systemic-wide fire that pretty much burns inside of us. So I do think of inflammation like a low-burning fire. And then when you top off some of these other conditions, which can't be helped, it's almost like adding a little bit of fuel to the flame. All right, so here's a good example. Type 2 diabetes starts to develop. So that really means that the body's becoming less responsive or less sensitive to insulin. So what happens with that is we develop that insulin resistance, meaning we're not responding as well as we used to. And therefore that can lead to inflammation. So this vicious cycle can result from just something like insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. So what happens is more inflammation causes more insulin resistance and vice versa. So other diseases that are associated with chronic inflammation include cardiovascular disease. So think about all those heart conditions, congestive heart failure, atherosclerosis, AFib, all that kind of stuff, arthritis, joint diseases, allergies, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, otherwise known as COPD. Now, the prevalence of diseases associated with chronic inflammation is anticipated to increase persistently over the next 30 years in the United States. And I do find that true because as we see with the dietary guidelines that are released each year, they get stricter and stricter. But what I'm seeing is that the chronic disease prevalence just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Nothing to be discouraged about. We just got to have a game plan. But recent estimates show that nearly 60% of Americans have at least one chronic condition, 42% have more than one, and 12% have at least 5 or more, which is pretty crazy. So Needless to say, most of the population is combating either 1, 2, or up to 5 forms of chronic inflammation. All right. Oh, and the one thing I do want to mention with chronic inflammation is very similarly, it takes a long time to develop. And like I said, similarly, it takes a long time to heal and work towards combating that. So none of this stuff happens directly overnight. So that's why we want to develop those healthy lifestyle habits so we can continue to fight inflammation on a long-term basis. All right, so let's talk about what are these inflammation fighting foods? And I'm going to talk about these here in more detail. But if we're looking at one magic food to fight that inflammation, there's no such thing. So basically, the standard diet, what we should be following, this is based on the dietary guidelines. This is also based on the MyPlate recommendations. All of these are going to fight that inflammation. Now, maybe you've heard of some of those other diets that are gaining in attention, such as the Mediterranean diet. That's also been known to fight inflammation, fight all kinds of chronic disease, including certain types of cancer. So this is almost kind of following a Mediterranean-esque diet, the dietary guide or the USDA MyPlate recommendations, the DASH diet. So I'm saying all this to say that even though we hear all these different dietary terms, they're kind of all speaking the same language. So you don't need to actively pursue one over the other as long as you're getting in that balance, you're getting in those foods that you see listed there. All right, so just an overview, healthy fat's going to come from things like nuts and seeds and fatty fish like your salmon and your tuna and your mackerel. Think about avocados and olive oil. In fact, fun fact for you, extra virgin olive oil has a natural chemical in it called oleocanthal, which shares similar properties with the anti-inflammatory drug ibuprofen. So how cool is that? It's almost the same thing. And I'm not saying anytime you have like a headache or you need some kind of pain reliever, you should start eating a bunch of fatty fish like salmon. It's not like that, but I'm sorry, olive oil. But I do think that that's pretty cool. They have similar chemical properties. Pretty cool stuff. All right, the other thing we want to include, obviously, lots of fruits and veggies. So think about the colors. All of that translates to antioxidants. So dark leafy greens like spinach and kale and collards. You got fruits and veggies, strawberries, blueberries, cherries, oranges, tomatoes. All of those are naturally high in those antioxidants. And they also have something called polyphenols, which are protective compounds that are found in plants. So it's naturally found, and that's pretty cool. So there's a reason why we tell you to eat the rainbow. All those colors really translate to those protective antioxidants. So I think that's really cool. All right, high fiber foods like beans and whole grains. We'll talk about why fiber is super important. We often associate that with our digestive tract, but it also helps with combating inflammation. Now, coffee and tea, which is great news for my coffee and tea drinkers out there. Maybe you are both. So coffee contains polyphenols and other anti-inflammatory compounds that also can protect against inflammation. And then lastly, we'll talk about those spices, some of the best and heaviest hitters in the whole antioxidant arena. So I'm excited to dive into this a little bit deeper with you all. But I do need to talk about the foods that naturally cause inflammation. So we just covered the ones that fight inflammation. Let's talk about the ones that cause cause inflammation. Now, as you were all introduced, I love food. I expect most of you all do too. So I'm a firm believer that all foods fit and in moderation. So just because if you see some of your favorite items here, I'm not saying you can't have them or, oh my gosh, if you have one of those items there, then you're going to give your body a whole systemic inflammation response. It doesn't work that way. These are long-term poor dietary habits that can promote inflammation. So treat your treats as such. They're treats. So we're going to have them in moderation. I see some of my favorite foods listed there, but that's just what we should be embracing, more of a balanced diet and having our treats on occasion. So just wanted to allow a sigh of relief if you were thinking that I was going to be the food police here and say you can't have these foods anymore. It's not like that. But let's talk about how these foods can cause inflammation. So anything that's highly processed, very refined, especially our refined carbohydrates are something that actually can lead to the growing rates of obesity. So we used to think that fat was the driving factor, too much fat in the diet. That's why people are, have a problem with excessive adipose tissue, meaning that, they are in that overweight or obese category. What research is finding is actually refined sugars that are the driving force behind the growing rates of obesity, which I thought was really, really fascinating. All right, so let's talk about those sweets and treats. Now, I do have a sweet tooth. So again, take this with a grain of salt, no pun intended. But yeah, I love my sweets. We're just having them in moderation. But processed sugars actually trigger the release of something that's pro-inflammatory called cytokines. So it's very interesting that a lot of products that we find in the market or on the shelves will end with the word ose. So sucrose or high fructose corn syrup. We just want to be careful with that. Now, there are other natural sugars that are fine. So think about fruit. It's got that naturally sweet fructose to it, and that's totally fine. That does not count to these refined sugars. Think about the big culprits out there: cookies, cakes, pies, donuts. I know, all the good stuff, but we want to have those in moderation. Now, again, I'm not saying that once you have something like that, your body is all automatically in an inflammatory state. It's just long term that we don't want to be having these every single day. Red meat is another big one. In fact, anything that's really high in saturated fat. Studies also show that saturated fat triggers adipose tissue, which is our fat tissue, inflammation. So pizza, cheese, fried foods, these are very notorious in the American diet. These are some of the biggest sources of saturated fat. And the American Cancer Institute, as well as the American Heart Association, is telling us we really, really need to cut back on our saturated fat intake. Okay, alcohol. This is another big one. Excessive use of alcohol will weaken our liver function, also weakens our immune system that can cause inflammation. We will talk a little bit more about alcohol throughout this presentation because there is a specific type of alcohol that may have anti-inflammatory benefits, but we're going to cover that here in a little more detail. So at the end of the day, just keep in mind that these foods are calorically dense. They don't offer a whole lot of nutrition. They can contribute to weight gain. Of course, as our weight goes up, so does our risk for inflammation and other chronic diseases. So again, take home message with this. I cannot emphasize it enough. Treat our treats as such. They're just meant to be enjoyed on occasion. All right, so let's talk about ways that we can eat. So we talked about the food groups. Let's talk about how we can eat to reduce inflammation. So maybe you're familiar with this, maybe you're not, but this is the anti-inflammatory pyramid created by Dr. Andrew Weil. Now, Dr. Weil is a Harvard-trained medical doctor. He specializes in complementary and alternative medicine, and he's the director of the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona, and he's a well-known author. So he's basically dedicated his whole life to anti-inflammatory diets that can help prevent that chronic systemic inflammation that can contribute to heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and other autoimmune diseases, especially like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. So he is the father of inflammation. I said all that to say that. So he knows what he's doing here. Okay, so this food pyramid does aim to reduce inflammation based on scientific research. So that's kind of nice. It's not just a pretty pyramid to follow. It's scientifically proven to help combat inflammation. So as you can see, it just emphasizes minimizing consumption of processed foods like fast food and convenience items, cheese, red meats, and things like that. And it steers individuals towards a wide variety of foods. So that really shouldn't come as any surprise. We're seeing lots of fruits and veggies. We've got whole grains as you're going up the pyramid. You have your healthy starches or your complex carbohydrates. We've got a section for nuts and seeds and beans and legumes. As you climb up, there's an emphasis on that heart healthy or those fatty fish. Like I had mentioned, tuna and salmon and mackerel. As you keep going up, you see soy, cooked Asian mushrooms, which is pretty cool. In fact, little tidbit for you, Dr. Weil is a huge proponent of Asian mushroom species, specifically shiitake, oyster, maitake, and enoki. So unfortunately, if you're somebody where you love the portobello or you love the whitecap mushrooms, they do not have the anti-inflammatory capabilities like those Asian mushroom species. I'm not saying you can't have mushrooms. Again, I love mushrooms, but I don't love the shiitake variety. But that's okay because look, you got so many other choices on that food pyramid. So again, as you go up, we should be minimizing the consumption of this, a little less often. So you've got the sources of poultry and the cheese. You have heart healthy herbs and spices. Again, we'll talk about what that looks like here. Tea, specifically the green tea, the oolong tea, the white tea, have very, very powerful antioxidants. There is a section for supplements, which I will talk about that here in just a second. But if you notice at the top, there's a section for that red wine and dark chocolate. So we're going to take that lightly though, nothing to go haywire on, but there's good news all around for my dark chocolate and wine lovers. We are going to focus on those three main components, the three main commonalities that you see here, and that's going to be fiber. So we're seeing a lot of fiber-rich foods. We're also seeing a lot of omega-3s, those fatty fish, heart-healthy fats, and then antioxidants. So those are the three things that we're going to cover here in more detail. So fiber. What are the fiber goals? Why is this important? So eating a diet that's rich in fiber can yield lots and lots of I almost said real world rewards. I'm sorry, I need a little more coffee today. Okay, so it can lower those markers of inflammation. It can help with our digestive tract. It also helps with our heart health. It lowers cholesterol. So lots and lots of benefits to eating fiber-rich foods. Fiber also contains something called prebiotics. Now, we hear a lot about those probiotics, and I think people get very confused. Well, what are those prebiotics? So that word pre means before. So I often just say this is the before food that those probiotics, meaning that good gut bacteria, need to feed off of. So we get these prebiotics naturally from fiber-rich foods. So when we have healthy guts, we've got more prevalence of that good gut bacteria, which can help lower levels of inflammation in our body. So that's kind of the fiber and inflammation connection here. Also, I had mentioned too that fiber lowers that bad cholesterol, that LDL, can raise that good cholesterol, that HDL. And a few studies have found that people who eat diets that are rich in fiber have lower C-reactive protein or CRP levels in their blood. Now, CRP is a marker of inflammation. In fact, if you get regular lab work or you get regular check-ins with your doctor and they're drawing labs, there is a section to see what your CRP levels are reading. So it helps your medical provider see if there's any kind of systemic inflammation that's going on. All right, so fiber-rich foods, what are those good sources? Fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, whole grains. All of those provide an added dose of vitamins and minerals. And of course, we're talking about that fiber, so we're getting plenty of that. There is a difference between soluble and insoluble. Both are beneficial, but I just want to talk about the difference in case you're hearing the two and you're wondering what's the deal. Soluble fiber mixes with water to form a gel. We call that gelatinous fiber, and it slows down digestion, which sounds like, well, isn't that bad for me? No, actually, it's really good. Because of that slowing, it allows your body that ample time to absorb all those nutrients. So the best places to find that soluble fiber are going to be things like nuts and seeds and beans, lentils, oat bran, and barley. Now, insoluble fiber, just as important, it also helps aid in our digestive tract, helps it run more efficiently. It adds bulk to our stool, which helps prevent constipation. And we're going to find insoluble fiber in more of those tougher, stringier items. Think about vegetables that are a little more tough, like rough or a little more roughage. Stringy asparagus is a good example. Your dark leafy greens. Think about sometimes kale, that little rough stalk. If you're okay tolerating that, I like to eat around that. But you have other options, your whole grains, your legumes, and wheat bran. So getting in both is key. Now, fiber goals, most Americans are not getting the recommended amount, which is 20 to 35 grams per day. In fact, the average is really just 14 grams a day. So if you're somebody where you know you're probably not getting in enough fiber, you can always try making it a goal to just amp it up a little bit. A little bit here and there does add up, make a difference. So you can try to sneak in more whole grains. And the reason why we want our grains to be whole is because they have all their nutrients still intact and they have that added fiber component. You can also try adding a little bit of fruits, a little bit of vegetables in between your snacks. And of course, we know with the MyPlate recommendations, we should be filling up half our plate with those good old fruits and veggies. So if you know you're not doing well in the fiber department, I would not recommend jumping from where you're at to trying to get in that full 35 grams per day. Because if you've ever done that, or when you are trying to gradually introduce more fibers, your stomach is just taking a little bit time, your digestive tract, I should say, is taking a little bit longer to get used to it. So you might experience some of those unpleasant signs of more fiber, like the gas and the bloating, but that is all going to go away in time. It's just that your body's having to adapt. And if you are somebody where maybe you have a gluten intolerance or you suffer from celiac disease, you can talk to a dietitian or an in-store nutritionist at Giant, and we can help come up with some other high fiber foods instead. Also, in addition to the importance of fiber, don't forget to drink plenty of water, because water actually, that's what our colon pulls in to the system. So it helps just naturally flush things out, helps, once again, make your digestive tract run more efficiently. What's the deal with fiber supplements? So studies show that high fiber, whether it's coming naturally from your diet or a supplement, so think Metamucil or something like that, can still help lower CRP. Remember, that's the inflammatory marker. It can lower it in some individuals, but this is not true for everybody. So somebody might see lower levels and somebody might not. Now, keep in mind with supplements, we don't always want to be resorting to these. They don't always provide the vitamins, the minerals, plus they don't provide that fiber. So just keep that in mind. We always say it's best to get your sources from food first and then supplement as needed and then supplement per your doctor's recommendations. Omega-3s, another wonderful thing that help combat inflammation. So these are part of a heart healthy diet, and our bodies cannot naturally manufacture omega-3. So we just need to keep that in mind. That's why we depend on exogenous sources, such as what you see there. So specifically, maybe you've heard of EPA and DHA types of omega-3s. Those are just, again, the anti-inflammatory derivatives. So these are going to be found in the fatty fish, like I had mentioned, tuna, salmon, anchovies. Now, if you are somebody where you're plant-based, or maybe you just don't like seafood, that's totally fine because you can still get the plant form of omega-3s. We call that alpha-linoleic, ALA. So you talk about EPA, DHA, there's also ALA, which is found in plants. And this is available in vegetables, nuts, seeds, flax seeds, and flaxseed oil. So if you're wondering, well, what's my recommendation for omega-3s? According to data from the 2011 and 2012 NHANES survey, most children and adults in the United States are consuming the recommended amounts of omega-3s as ALA, meaning it's more the plant-based form. So opting for those heart-healthy fats and seafood, as well as getting a lot of plant-based sources, can ultimately help you get in enough of those omega-3s. So what about fish oil supplements? I get this question all the time. So here's what the research is showing. Several studies have evaluated fish oil supplements that can help prevent heart disease, cancer, and other conditions that have been attributed to chronic inflammation. However, there is still no convincing evidence to recommend them, especially at high doses. So one exception is if you have very, very high triglycerides in your blood, your doctor might prescribe Lavazza, which is a fish oil medication. It contains a bunch of ALA as well as that DHA. So it has that combination there. And the recommendation, well, not the recommendations, but usually the medication dose recommends up to 4 times a day. So that's a lot. Now, if you don't have exorbitantly high triglycerides and your doctor has not advised you to take a fish oil supplement, then your best bet is really just incorporating them more into your diet. Now, keep in mind too that non-prescription fish oils are notoriously prone to spoil. So once again, we always say that food first is best, and then you can supplement as needed. But just keep in mind that there isn't convincing evidence out there that everybody needs to start taking fish oil supplements, especially since data is showing that we generally don't have an omega-3 deficiency in our society. So I would just say keep aiming for that variety. This is my favorite part. I love talking about antioxidants. Now, I talked about free radical oxidative stress. This is where we have these natural food fighters. That's what we call them. So antioxidants are substances that can prevent or slow down the damage that's caused by that free radical oxidation. Those are those unstable molecules that we come into contact with from the environment. So antioxidants found in foods and spices are going to serve as that protective agent. So the more that we get, the more we're fighting off that inflammation. Now, this is what I think is so cool. Antioxidant values are listed, or they are expressed in the ORAC chart. ORAC stands for Oxygen Radical Absorbance Capacity. And this is a unit of measure that basically just measures the antioxidant content. And this was developed by the National Institute on Aging at the National Institute of Health. NIA, NIH. So I'm just saying that this is a scientifically proven chart to measure antioxidant activity. So the nice part, let's look at all these wonderful foods that just have this anti-inflammatory capability. And this is ranked by the ORAC. So kind of it's listed in almost backwards order. So I'm not saying that they're not powerful enough, but starting at the top, fruits and vegetables still have antioxidant capabilities ranked by the ORAC chart. So once again, we're getting lots of variety, lots of color, and that's because carotenoids and flavonoids give fruits and veggies that bright, beautiful color. but the brighter, the better. So again, you don't need to, when you're at the grocery store, you don't need to pick the brightest and most luminous type of tomato or carrots. All I'm saying is that you just want to fill your cart with lots of color. Beets, blueberries, broccoli, grapes, oranges, dark leafy greens, all of that. Again, reason why we tell you to eat the rainbow, because of those antioxidant properties. Now, staying in the produce section, we also have our aromatics. So think about garlic and onion. I love cooking with garlic and onion. It's just a wonderful way to add flavor, and plus it makes my kitchen smell fantastic. So anytime I'm cooking with garlic and onion, I am not upset about that at all. Teas, what about the types of teas? So all teas, green or black, are rich in polyphenols, which is a type of antioxidant. In fact, tea has about 8 to times the polyphenol activity more, 8 to 10 times more polyphenol activity as opposed to fruits and vegetables. So we're kind of going in backwards order. We got fruits and vegetables, we got the aromatics, now we're at the tea, and we're just kind of climbing up, even though the slide looks like it's backwards. Okay, so black and green tea do have different types of antioxidants than fruits and vegetables. So you need both. So again, I'm not saying that you need to get all your antioxidants from fruits or all your antioxidants from green and black tea. It's really getting in both. Now, if you're not even a green or black tea drinker, I'm not, that's okay. You've got plenty of other options to choose from. I also do want to take note that how we doctor up our tea and our black tea, our green tea and black tea does matter. So if you're throwing in a ton of sugar or a ton of cream, you're probably not getting all the benefits of antioxidants. And I will also say that be careful with some of those packaged drinks, what you'd find in a bottle, because more than likely they're not coming from a loose leaf variety, they're coming from a powdered version. So you're probably not getting those antioxidant benefits. So again, you have other options here. And just because you're not a tea drinker, you don't need to actively become one, because you have so many other ways of getting an antioxidant benefits. What about those nuts and beans? So this is kind of cool. Each nut does offer a unique nutrition profile, but most nuts do contain phytochemicals like resveratrol and plant sterols, which can naturally help lower cholesterol. Remember, high cholesterol, that's going to promote inflammation. Now, beans, not only in addition to their wonderful fiber content, they also have that protein. But a new study has found that beans, especially black beans, are a rich but often overlooked source of antioxidants. So I'm not, once again, saying that everybody needs to only consume black beans, but again, think about the color, think about variety. So we got red beans, black beans, pinto, kidney. So more color, the better. All right, let's talk about red wine. This is my favorite topic here with this antioxidant category here. This is the most famous polyphenol. It has resveratrol, which has been shown to prevent chronic systemic inflammation in several distinct ways, including reducing swelling, reducing pain, and reducing inflammation. Here's the caveat though. Does need to be red wine if you want the benefits of those antioxidants. So if you are a white wine drinker, maybe you like liquor, or maybe you like beer, unfortunately, you will not get those antioxidant benefits. It has to be from red wine because of that deep, rich red color that we get from that resveratrol. Also, the recommendations for wine is 1 glass for women and 2 for men. I usually go by the 5 and 5 rule. So pour yourself a 5-ounce glass and have if you're a woman, no more than 1 glass, a 5-ounce serving for 5 days a week. Men, you get a little bit more, which is a little bit of an unfair advantage. But if you are somebody where you're likely to deviate from the recommended portion size, you're heavy-handed, you have a heavy pour, or if you have been advised by your doctor not to take any kind of alcohol, maybe you're on a medication, there's some interaction, then obviously you want to heed the advice of your medical provider. The good news is that you can still get some antioxidant power from half a cup of grape juice or half a cup of pomegranate juice. You got that deep, deep, rich red color. There's also blueberry juice out there. So just stick to the portion size that you would serve yourself if you were having a glass of wine, and you're still going to reap those antioxidant benefits. All right. Dark chocolate, another wonderful thing. It is loaded with organic compounds. Notice how as we're going down the list, we're getting more and more powerful antioxidants. So the nice part with this is that they have biologically active substances that do function as antioxidants. These are going to include polyphenols, flavonols, cachectins, among several others. In fact, one study showed that cocoa in dark chocolate had more antioxidant activity, polyphenols, and flavonols than any other fruit tested, which included blueberries and acai berries. We often hear about blueberries and acai berries as being a very, very powerful, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking all of a sudden. I must be so excited. These have more antioxidant capabilities than blueberries and acai berries, which is pretty cool. Now, very similar with the alcohol. We don't want to go crazy on our dark chocolate. So stick to the serving size. Having a little square, little piece as an afternoon treat is totally fine. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We want to get in that variety, but it's still kind of nice, especially for those who, like me, have a sweet tooth. You might maybe get those afternoon cravings, especially for chocolate. That's me every day. So having a little piece of dark chocolate does kind of take that edge off, or just help satiate your desire for something really, really sweet. I love having dark chocolate on hand. All right. Remember what I said with these herbs and spices. These are some of the heaviest hitters in the arena of the antioxidant world. They're all stars with antioxidants. So they deliver the highest concentration of antioxidants per 100 grams, as opposed to their counterparts like dark chocolate, wine, even fruits and veggies. Plus, they don't yield calories. They don't have extra fat or anything. So, and keep in mind that, dark chocolate and red wine, they're going to be extra calories. So I love the fact that herbs and spices bring wonderful flavor. They bring that wonderful antioxidant component to our meals, and there's no drawbacks, or there's no recommended guidelines, or, have this in moderation. So if you're wondering, well, what are the best picks for me? Honestly, kind of what we already cook with, or what you might already have on hand. So think about your rosemary, your ginger, your turmeric, your cayenne, and my personal favorite, cinnamon. In fact, if we're talking about the ORAC chart, I don't have the chart here in front of me. It is number one on the ORAC chart, meaning it is, in fact, it's off the chains with this, off the chain, I mean, with its antioxidant capability. And I love cinnamon. So you can put half a teaspoon. That's all you need. You don't need to have gobs and gobs and gobs of these spices. So half a teaspoon in your coffee, or half a teaspoon in some yogurt or oatmeal. It's definitely hot cereal weather. So that's a really great way of getting in just a mega dose of antioxidant capabilities. Oh, and I did want to mention too, we don't have to worry about antioxidant toxicity. So, the more the better. You don't have to worry about your body going into overload with antioxidants. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, just wanted to say, what about the deal with supplements? I get another question about that with, or numerous questions about antioxidant supplements, especially like green tea supplement, or ginger, turmeric, stuff like that. So here's what the science is showing. Rigorous trials of antioxidant supplements in large studies, so a large group of people, have not found that high doses of antioxidant supplements do prevent chronic disease. So I'm not saying that these supplements are arbitrary or futile, but I'm also saying that, once again, the best way to get these antioxidants is really from your diet and not from a bottle. Also, if your doctor, I know some people, if they see a rheumatoid arthritis, an RA specialist. I cannot think of the name right now, so maybe in the chat box you can tell me. It's oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on an doctor who specializes in rheumatoid arthritis. I can't believe I forgot that. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about. If that doctor has prescribed you to stay on some kind of anti-inflammatory supplement, of course, listen to your doctor. But I'm just sharing what research has tried to identify with antioxidant supplementation. Okay. My apologies about that. It's a Tuesday. I'm functioning like it's a Monday still. Okay. So what about other lifestyle factors? So I love talking about sleep, because I meet so many people where they compromise on sleep, and it's easy to do, but it can actually induce inflammation. Going to bed and waking up at the same time does help reinforce a healthy circadian rhythm, meaning our sleep and our awake cycle. Plus, it also helps strengthen our immune system. So I always say that when we go down to sleep at night, that's when our bodies really kick it into high gear. We need that rest. We need that recovery. We need to feel rejuvenated for the next day. So that's why sleep is so important. In fact, research has shown that one night of insufficient sleep is enough to activate pro-inflammatory processes in the body. How sad is that? Because I, for one, have had a few nights of just not being able to fall asleep. I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't go back to sleep. So that's an insufficient night of sleep, and you can't often control that. Plus, we got stress. Sometimes there's medication that might induce insomnia. So we do have some factors that might work against us from getting that adequate sleep in, but current guidelines are saying that we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep in order to avoid a low-grade systemic inflammation that is associated with chronic disease and inflammation or aging. So stress can make that certainly hard. So that kind of brings me to my next point. Shifting out some lifestyle factors or some daily activities can reduce stress. So if you are somebody where you're prone to this, or this is impeding on your quality sleep, maybe try journaling. You can try, talking somebody. I know there's a point there with exercise, which I'll get to here in just a second. You might want to try yoga, meditation, prayer, whatever helps alleviate that stress. I actually find that burning candles really does help me feel a little more relaxed. So usually around the evening time, when it gets to be a little more dusk-like, I'll put on some candles, maybe put on a little jazz music. Oh my goodness, just does a lot to help elevate my mood. So even simple things like that can really help combat that stress. All right, so I do want to talk about stress reduction. This is still very, very important. A research study at Carnegie Mellon University found that chronic psychological stress is associated with the body losing its ability to regulate inflammatory responses. So that's kind of scary because we lose that ability when we have ongoing stress. So that's why maybe you've heard of stories where people who've had, think about pre-pandemic times where you've had people who've had really, really demanding jobs and they've been go, 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 lots of pressure, that they have found that those people are more prone to having cardiovascular event, or they might have early onset of chronic disease. So it's unfortunate that our lifestyle is as such. Now, hopefully, that with the pandemic, the only maybe good thing that's come out of it is that maybe there's a slower pace of life. We're not running and gunning, but I know that's not true for anybody or everybody. Some people have said, nope, there's no difference. I'm still running and gunning, especially with virtual schooling and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, your stress is your stress, but just try to think of those creative ways that you can manage it. Which brings me to the exercise point. This is good for us no matter what. There's a lot of long-term health benefits, releases those endorphins, which make us feel really good. But here's an interesting thing. A new research study published in the journal Brain Behavior and Immunity found that 20 minutes of daily exercise has significant benefits on the body's immune system. Now, current guidelines are telling us 30 minutes, but this study said 20 minutes actually have beneficial impact on our immunity, which once again, think about our immune system. That's our defense system. They're helping to fight off foreign invasion, helping to protect us from that free radical oxidation. So again, protect your immune system, protect your sleep, manage that stress. I always look at these as protective defense mechanisms. All right, so make it your goal. Current guidelines are saying 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's basically 150 minutes a week. So if you cannot get in that block of time with that 30 minutes, you can always divide it up. In fact, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 at night, there's your 30. I know that life is hard as is, or carving out that time is pretty challenging. Plus with the restrictions and, we want to stay safe. We want to keep our communities safe. We are definitely limited, but that's the beauty of, having a lot of resources accessible at our fingertips, like on-demand channels. We also have YouTube channels. You can do some living room exercises. I always say capitalize on whatever day of the week that you have some more time. It's usually that's the weekends for me. And so I'm talking little things like parking at the furthest end of the parking spot or taking the steps when you can. I know a lot of people have those step trackers. So even if you're stepping in place, all of that matters. So don't be discouraged if you can't get in a full body workout. Every little bit helps. It's really the sedentary lifestyle where you're not moving all day long that can be detrimental long term. All right, how about hydration? So our bodies are mostly water, 60 to 75%, and every major organ needs water to operate on. So obviously, it's very, very important. But sadly, most of us don't get enough hydration. I am one of them. I'm not much of a water drinker, especially in the wintertime, because I get cold very easily. So it's really, really hard for me to get in my water. But here's the nice part about hydration. It is a natural detoxifier. So what it does is it flushes out toxins, which can help reduce inflammation. So that's one thing where I know a lot of people go on these crazy detox diets, or they follow something that, squeezing lemon juice and apple cider vinegar. You don't need to do that. You can just drink a bunch of water because that's going to naturally pull out those toxins. A good rule of thumb is 64 fluid ounces a day. However, this is going to vary depending on individuals. Plus, if you have other conditions and your doctor's told you to limit your fluid intake, then of course you want to adhere to the advice of your doctor. All right, so that's basically everything that we need to include with our lifestyle factors. And I do need to watch my time. I'm so sorry. I get a little bit too excited about this topic. So if I do pick up the pace a little bit more, I do apologize. So let me just quickly cruise through these two navigation tools that you can expect to find at Giant. One is How Good. Now, this is not a nutrition rating system. It's an environmental rating system. Nevertheless, there's a growing concern among consumers about where their food is coming from. And How Good really tells you the story on how it came from the field to the shelf. So as you can see, there's guidelines that must be met for the grower and the manufacturer in order to have a how good rating. One is growing guidelines. So there's minimal use of pesticides and herbicides. Oh, there's also humane treatment towards animals and people, which is great. Processing practices, such as, yes, like I had said, with minimal use of herbicides and pesticides. And then lastly, company conduct. So there's that aspect of transparency, integrity, and you can kind of trace back these ingredients where they came from. Which I think is really cool. So I just say that because if you are shopping or you're doing online shopping and you see great by the word or best, it's not to be confused with nutrition. It could be nutritious. I'm not saying it's not, but it's more how good or how great or the best it is on the environment. So I just want to kind of mention that part. Now, guiding stars on the right is a nutrition rating system. I love talking about guiding stars because many people don't know it's available at Giant. As you can see, it's a little figure with stars above the head. 1 star means the product is good nutritionally. 2 stars means it's better. 3 stars means it's best. Obviously, the more stars, the better. What earns a product a star versus not is based on credits and debits. So a product would be credited a star if it has more B vitamins or more omega-3s or more fiber. Sorry, that's what I was thinking of. And then something might also, or it might be credited a star or given a star with debits, things that we should get less of in our diet. Like we were talking about, less added sugar, less saturated fat, less sodium. So the nice part with guiding stars, it's found all throughout the aisles of Giant. So there's that myth that you're able to debunk that you shouldn't shop the center aisles. That's where all the bad food is. That's not true thanks to guiding stars. You can find quite a bit. So next time you're at the store, look for it. It's kind of small. That's why a lot of people don't know it exists. We already know where to find the price tag. So in that bottom right-hand corner, you should see the guiding stars symbol. Not every single product is going to have a rating. So I'm not saying that, you need to make it a goal to get everything in your cart guiding stars, but if you're ever faced with a decision, like let's say for instance, I'm just going to pick on green beans. You have one product or you have one variety of green beans that does not have a star and you have one that does. Obviously, you want to choose the one that has the guiding star because it's just better nutritionally. And my guess is because it earns a star, it's probably because it has less added sodium. So you can kind of start to figure out what might have, why it got a star versus not based on the information I just provided. All right, I had mentioned too how to spot the stars. So this is a nice visual right by the price tag. You can kind of see, and of course in the dairy section, that's kind of cool because a lot of people think that's where a lot of saturated fat is, a lot of added sugar. It can be, but nice part is there's some guiding stars rated products there too. So same thing with the cereal aisle. A lot of people are like, oh, there can't be any good cereals out there. Not true, actually, thanks to guiding stars. In fact, any own brand products or private brands coming from Giant, they will actually have the star on the box, which is kind of nice. You don't have to worry about a shelf tag. All right, so here are some products that we love that are just part of the whole inflammation fighting pyramid that we're talking about, or the MyPlate, whichever one jives with your routine, your lifestyle. So I won't go through each product just for time's sake, but we love our little time savers. Again, these are great ways to bring more balance to our plate or just bulk up the veggie intake. So having a bag salad on hand or trying to incorporate those zucchini noodles. I actually do that with my pasta. Love pasta. So if I'm making spaghetti and turkey meatballs, I will make half whole wheat pasta and half with these zucchini noodles that cook down really well. And they do get that al dente texture that pasta just naturally has. So that's one way that I sneak in more veggies. And then during the winter months, I'm always cold, as I just mentioned. So getting in some warm veggies is a great incentive for me. So these Man's Nourish bowls, you pop them in the microwave. There's a little sauce packet, so they're flavorful. And they've got whole grains, and they've got lots of veggies. So if you're looking to bring more balance, you can add some kind of protein, whether it's beans or legumes or even some, chicken or something like that, or salmon. Salmon would work. All right, so fiber, antioxidants, remember, these naturally fight inflammation. So I talked about those beans. They're really, really powerful. Lentils, you got your nuts and your seeds. So fiber is our friend. It makes us feel full, longer. It helps lower cholesterol. It also helps fight inflammation. Omega-3s, remember I talked about how we can get plant and animal sources. So again, if you're plant forward, plant-based, or you're, flexitarian, or you'll eat anything kind of like me, you can still get plenty of omega-3s in our diet or in your diet. So flax seeds, walnuts, fatty fish. I think we kind of covered that. And of course, having some seafood on hand. I always have seafood in my freezer just because it's a really great meal solution. And every time I'm eating it, I think, I'm getting in some good omega-3s as well as lean protein. All right, so just some antioxidants. We covered a lot here. We covered the black tea, the green tea. Remember, how you doctor up your tea matters, and also trying not to get it from a bottle because it probably does not have the antioxidant power like the loose leaf varieties. Spices, I know that there's tons and tons of spices out there. I just put the cayenne pepper there as a visual. And then what I found is actually pretty cool. Salad dressing or marinade with olive oil. Remember those heart healthy fats, the vitamin E, that oleocanthal that we talked about with those fresh herbs inside. I think that's actually really great. I use that for a salad dressing instead. There's the red wine. I'm not saying that that's the brand you need to choose, but keep in mind if you're likely to deviate from the serving size, or it's something that you might go overboard on, then probably having half a glass of pomegranate juice or grape juice will just do the trick. And then here's something cool. I love this chocolate variety because we talked about dark chocolate, super powerful with those antioxidants. But here you see they've added cayenne pepper. Oh, that's a big heavy hitter. And then they've added dark cherries to it. So you got cinnamon, cayenne, I'm just hearing lots and lots and lots of antioxidant power just in a small piece of chocolate. So that's pretty cool. All right, in the kitchen, how can we tie all this together? Well, basically start by using the MyPlate. So this is how we want to construct our plate. So make the bulk of your diet, the bulk of your plate, fruits and veggies. We got to get in those complex carbohydrates, those whole grains. So think about whole wheat pasta, whole wheat bread, brown rice. Try to get in those whole grains as much as you can. And then protein is a great way to add in some of those fatty fish or that healthy seafood. And then dairy's off to the side, not saying that it's not important, but we know that sometimes people don't really eat dairy for dinner. I actually like to tell people, you can tuck the fruit aside, have that as a snack. You can tuck the dairy aside, have that as your breakfast. But either way, balance is key. All right, if you need additional cooking inspiration, we have our giant website. And so you can filter recipes using guiding stars. So I talked about those products that have guiding stars ratings, but you can also find entire recipes. So remember, think about less sodium, less saturated fat, more fiber, more B vitamins. So that's kind of cool if you can find a recipe that has guiding stars. All right, Pinterest is another one. We also love eatwell.com. I could be here all day talking about our favorite resources, but these are just a few. We have our Nutrition Made Easy blog available on our website. We also have our podcast. For those of you who listen to podcasts, these are about 20 to 30 minute long episodes. And we do have a very special one on fighting inflammation. All right, so additional resources available. I know that Charisse had mentioned that we provide one-on-one consultations. So if you have health and wellness goals and you want that individual accountability or that individual attention, we can definitely provide that for you. We also have a plethora of other classes going on. February is a huge month for a lot of good things going on. We got heart health awareness, we've got cancer prevention, we also have Black History Month. So we got lots of good things. So, we definitely want to connect with you that way. I had mentioned the blog, the podcast, all of this is available in one central location, which is giantfood.com/nutrition. All right. I'm sorry that was a mouthful. I'm sorry I had to pick up my pace, but I did want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I also wanted to allow some time for Q&A. So I'll stop my screen share. And then just allow for some Q&A. I think, Charisse, you were going to help filter some questions. So I am ready.
All right. Well, thanks, Kristen. Are you okay to stay to answer all the questions that we have?
Absolutely. I have to hop off for a call at 12, but
Okay.
we have some time. I'll just probably cruise through the questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
sounds good.
Welcome to emails too. Anybody, if you don't get your question, send me an email. I'll respond thoroughly that way.
Okay, sounds great. And please note the next nutrition class is Thursday. It's the Love Your Gut class, and that one is at noon. And I put the registration in the chat. I will send out links to the video recording, and we also appreciate any feedback on our survey, which we will send out in email and is also in the chat. Our first question was, what is the best blood test for systemic inflammation? I know you mentioned C-reactive protein.
Mm-hmm. So honestly, that's the best one. Now, keep in mind that when your doctor takes lab work, they will measure your white blood count. They'll also measure your temperature. So in the event that all of those were kind of elevated, then that might be indicative that you're fighting off an infection or something like that. But the CRP is more of a long-term. Those are acute phase responses. CRP is a little more long-term. And so I will say that if your levels are fine, if your temperature isn't elevated, your white blood count is, then chances are your CRP will not be either. But yeah, I would just talk to your doctor about it. But usually that's the number one measure that they go off of with measuring inflammation. Good question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Are frozen fruits and vegetables as nutritious as fresh? Does it make a difference how you prepare your fruits and vegetables, raw versus cooked?
That's a fantastic question. I do apologize. I should have addressed that in the question because we get that all the time. So, fresh, frozen, or canned, all forms fit. Now, I know if you're thinking, well, wait, the canned, what about the sodium? So, we do want to choose those lower salt or no salt added varieties. Worst case scenario, you can always just double rinse to help leach out some of that extra sodium. But all of them are on the same playing field with nutrients. As we cook, doesn't matter what we're cooking with, there's going to be some negligible losses, but there's no superior form with the nutrient content. Now, I know that the raw food diet was really popular years ago. I think a lot of celebrities were doing that. But honestly, you don't need to eat raw to maximize your nutrient intake. It's all going to be the same pretty much. So great question. I apologize I didn't address that in the presentation.
We have a question about if there's a concern with some chocolate brands having high amounts of cadmium and lead.
I actually am not familiar with that. And I can definitely look back. If that person who sent that wants to email me, I can definitely look into that. I haven't heard it, but I'm not saying that it's not something that is something that's relevant. You know, I always check the ingredient list. And so that's my go-to for all my mystery work. If I'm seeing 100% or dark cacao, seeing a little bit of like cane sugar or something like that. If I'm not seeing any lead or the other word, I'm sorry, cadmium, it's not in the product. So, you know, that, and keep in mind that that's an FDA regulated thing. So there's no such thing as companies deceiving you and throwing in ingredients and not having it reflected in the ingredient list. That's illegal. So anyway, I always rest assured that whatever I see the ingredient list, if I'm not seeing those words, then I'm good.
Thank you. And is there a difference in the different brands of cinnamon? This question mentions coumarin, Ceylon, and cassia cinnamon.
I'm not familiar with like the different types. I know that usually it has to do with the root, like the closer you are to the root. And so that's going to just depend. Like you can get, there's two types of cinnamon at Giant. And we've done kind of like a cinnamon taste test before back, you know, when we were out boots on the ground and everything. Usually it doesn't impact the antioxidant capability. It's really just affects the pungency. So the closer that you get to the root, the more pungent, the strong taste the cinnamon has. And of course, the further away, it becomes a little more mild. But cinnamon is still cinnamon, so you're going to get those wonderful antioxidant benefits. These are fantastic questions.
Yes, very good questions. Okay, one more question so we can end on time. I was wondering this too, the chocolate cherry with cinnamon and cayenne, where can you locate that in Giant? Is that in the candy aisle?
No, it's actually not. It's in the Nature's Promise section. I should have mentioned that it's organic, but it's also fair trade. So part of the proceeds go to like I think it's protecting endangered species, which is pretty cool. So that's a food that gives back, which I love. So yeah, Nature's Promise is where I go to get all my little chocolate needs. But yes, the candy aisle does have the Lindt chocolate where they have the 70% cacao and stuff like that. So either or, but that specific variety that you're looking for is found in Nature's Promise. It's my favorite aisle.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate the class today.
Yeah.
And again, if any of you have any additional questions, the email is in the chat and feel free to reach out. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. I hope everyone stays well and take care. Yes. And I'll see you back later on this month. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Great. Okay, stay safe in the snow, everyone, today.
You too. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.